All right, hello, it's Friday afternoon. Usually that means it's time for read between the headlines, but this week we have a slight change to proceedings. Noticed through the first few weeks of read between the headlines that the stuff that people were really finding interesting is when we talked about companies that were doing interesting things, usually in the name of repositioning. So read between the headlines is now becoming making moves. And we will talk, same format. Our team will still send us headlines and interesting news from the week, but we will highlight a company or two who are making moves by repositioning in their market for success. Could be through a campaign, could be through product or service innovation, could be through a rebrand, could be through anything really that we see as being interesting ways to reposition. We'll interrogate it, discuss it, debate it, probably sometimes argue about it, and discuss what we think they've done for better or for worse in some cases. Still always unscripted, still unedited, still always in under 15 minutes. Therefore, we still will always need some sort of mental stimulation. And this week, I am sipping on a matcha green tea, first timer. Thought I'd see what the buzz literally is all about. So we'll see how we go with that. How about you?
Not my favorite matcha to dry. I've switched over to your brand, Hopper.
Yeah, the unofficial
lemon
sponsor.
lime, the lemon lime one, as they say.
Yeah, there we go. Citra hops.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
So this week we are going to talk about the headliner of repositioning over the last couple of weeks, Canva, or Canva 2.0, as they're now called. So why don't you kick us off? What have you been reading about Canva?
Well, as you say, there's lots of headlines through the thing there, but just to bounce off the Australian, so how Canva's big AI gamble is expected to pay off. I mean, obviously, that is almost not a headline. If you kind of go, wow, their repositioning is going to be about AI. It's like, well, which company hasn't done that? So I think it's more specifically repositioning. What I think is like a lot of companies in this space, they're trying to reposition to be an operating system. This seems to be the word that's coming through in most places, which is we're not this design software anywhere, we're an operating system. In their specific language, what they're talking about is end to end. How end to end? Theoretically, nowhere. There's no end to the end. I mean, you could, how early do you start? This will make you laugh. I think I saw in one of their promotional videos, I think the example given is, hey, Canva, pull from my library and build me a strategy plan.
Strategy plan. Roger Martin would love that.
Roger Martin would be like, obviously has not been reading Roger Martin's work. And so, it gives you an indication of how early they want to sort of start in those things. And obviously data and research is part of those examples as well. But ultimately, it's there. The thing I'd like to talk to you about is, where does that sit on the spectrum of amateur to professional? Because that's always what separated these things. And AI has come in and basically said to a lot of professional stuff, hey, you don't need to be doing all these pro control tools. You can just, AI will do it for you. So this is getting very blurry.
It is. I just want to touch on one thing first that's kind of quirky or unique about this Canva repositioning is we often talk about repositioning, a company repositioning in their market for growth or for success or something like that, right? Which is clearly ostensibly what Canva are doing, but actually I think the market they're repositioning in is the investor market. And I think probably the main driver of Canva 2.0, the AI shift, the AI acquisitions, is because they're building up to IPO next year, and they're probably thinking this is going to amplify that. Being valued as an AI organization as opposed to just a SaaS or a tech platform, potentially to drive up that sort of interest. So that's interesting in terms of a strategic imperative for repositioning. When it comes to this novice to expert thing, I think, given we're talking about creativity here, one thing that you and I have often discussed at length is what does creativity mean? How do you define creativity? And I think one curious way of exploring that is that you have creativity as a thought process, or even a thought skill or capability, but then you have the motor skills to actually be able to express that creativity, and that could be through sculpture, or it could be through drawing, or it could whatever. And over time, a lot of that has become digital. Are you skilled at designing in digital environments? What's interesting is now the motor skill bit is potentially getting taken by AI. So you can basically say you can have any concept or idea that you want in your mind. You could be one of these people that has always thought they're creative but can't actually execute anything. I would kind of count myself as maybe one of those sorts of people. I've always been frustrated by my body's ability to express what's in my head. But part of the promise of what something like Canva could bring to the table now is no, you just need to talk to this thing, and it will bring your wildest imagination to life. Whether that is the case or not, I don't know, but that's kind of what they're talking about, where they're talking about like an end-to-end partner through the full creative flow. They kind of position it as this kind of iterative conversation.
Yeah, the creative thing I'll talk about, I mean, this will go way over time here, but when we talk about real creativity, I think we can't undervalue the process of making creativity. So if we're talking about art for art's sake, AI is not replacing that. The experience of creating sculpture, of painting things, is all for you, the person doing those things. So in this world we're talking about here, it's all about content output. So until we decide the human race is plugged into things, or they get electrocuted if they don't do what you want them to do, ultimately we're still putting things in front of them to try and create attention, to grab their attention. And so creative in the commercial world is just stuff, be it video or whatever, to basically say, look at me and here's what we're supposed to talk about. They're repositioning, I think you're absolutely right, for sales. So they're trying to change their competitor set. They're basically saying, you used to put us up against big players like Adobe or Figma in that space. That's true. No, but hang on. Also price us against HubSpot, prices against MailChimp, prices against Microsoft Copilot, Google. I haven't quite understood yet whether or not they're even trying to go prices against OpenAI, meaning like, are they owned? I'm pretty sure it's all still just built on.
Well, they're talking about end-to-end creative flow.
So, yeah, absolutely. But true. But and so at the end of the day, they're all still powered by someone else's model. So that is an industry they're not necessarily in. But for everything else, trying to IPO, they're going to say, oh, well, if HubSpot's worth this and this is worth that, and we're a competitor and blah, blah. So you're absolutely right. They're doing that. But they're also definitely the sort of amateur tool for people making something for their kids thing, which in the last few years that has been moving, where they've gone
but that's from the mass, right? That's
well, it is, but talk about repositioning. They're repositioning with aggression. When you're talking about end-to-end capabilities, you're no longer talking to mum or dad making an invite to a party. They're not thinking about end-to-end capabilities. So clearly, this is a continuation, but a real push to enterprise level. And that's what, to me, is starting to rush towards, do they need the pro creator, content maker to say, yeah, I'll use it? Because definitely a bunch of, non-creative industries using it.
And that's interesting. Yeah. I don't know if I read this in a Canva press release or whether I read it in another kind of third-party media, but somewhere I saw they were looking to own end-to-end marketing automation, and that's a very different conversation, because that starts to make you think that they're moving towards being, pushing directly out to media as part of, make this thing and now post it to LinkedIn, which then potentially becomes, okay, well, are they going to start becoming a media channel of their own? Right?
One of their acquisitions in 2025, I think, was Dually, which is digital out of home. So that's literally owning the space. Now, it's still
push it. Yeah.
And then they've got analog things, printing and stuff. Now, I don't know enough about whether those third-party companies that are doing the printing and the physical stuff. So it's whether they're still just effectively the hub that's sending those things off, or whether they look to vertically integrate all of those things. Yeah, I mean, what I think is an interesting idea here is, this wasn't in the Australian article, but something else, which is the big bet they're betting on is that people don't want better tools, they want fewer tools. And I think that there are specialization tools like going crazy. The main ones are, they're the black holes that are acquiring them. And obviously there was a failed attempt with Figma and Adobe a year or so. So, I mean, they're the main players. The player I don't want to be is Adobe in that creative space. They've got fingers in all sorts of other things, but Figma still holds a high ground. Framer, I think personally in a lot of trouble, because there's so much about the platform, and there's so much like Claude and stuff that are coming that you go, do you really need this drag and drop solution?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about something like Canva is, compared to, like you said, Claude and Anthropic and OpenAI and ChatGPT, like it has guardrails. So like you've got a built-in utility that allows someone to kind of know how to use it. Well, I guess the risk is if they try and go too broad, then you start to lose that element of it. I think what else is interesting when we talk about repositioning with Canva is all the things they haven't done. So they're fundamentally saying that they're shifting themselves to the business model. They're trying to be seen as something else in the market, potentially to a different core market, like you said. But as far as I can see, they haven't touched, well, they've touched the name. They call it Canva 2.0, but they haven't touched there's no big rebrand. There's no blah, blah, blah. So
they're not doing it with promotions.
Exactly, which is where a lot of companies would traditionally see repositioning is, oh, we've got a rebrand. We've at least, changed the curvature of this or the color of that. No, this isn't about the branding or the logo.
Right, they're touching those things. They're putting little cues. They're putting spot. They're doing all those things. But you're 100% right. They're not doing your Nike rebrand positioning to tell everyone, by the way, we've changed. That's not their approach. And I think that this is the modern approach. This is the approach you have to do. Everything they're doing internally is saying, we are now going to be an operating system. So how are you innovating? And it's a message internally, and that's what they're doing. And that's obviously coming through the acquisitions. Well, acquisitions are ultimately filling gaps into the end-to-end proposition.
When it comes to the way we often talk about the anatomy of marketing and using that to understand how to go about a repositioning, it is curious that they have barely touched promotion. I mean, clearly they're doing a promotion through a press release to announce this as landing pages, yada, yada, yada. But it's predominantly a product play.
Yep.
And it's a pricing play. They've got this, I think the first 100 people to go to the landing page or something like that got to, try it for the first time. So there's this kind of scarcity thing. There's a pricing play. It'll have a different pricing model to it and stuff like that. And again, potentially some sort of distribution play as well, depending on how this starts fitting in.
I like Canva. I think they're going to go like really, really far in what they're doing, but I also feel like it's a race against the clock, because the hype, and I'll say hype because I don't know, the hype around things like Claude Code and co-work and things like that is that, why do you need a software partner? You can just say to AI, build me this thing. Why do I need any of that? So whether it'll get there, I don't know. That comes down to the interface and how they present that stuff. But like, I don't know. I wouldn't want to be, Another thing about repositioning is, if they don't move, they're being moved. So they have to.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to the IPO. That I think is the near term rationale for this. Yes, there's all the challenges and things like that, but I think, market share wise, they're still doing pretty well. I don't think they're an immediate threat. You could say they're future proofing in the face of all that sort of stuff, but I think with the 2027 IPO on the horizon, it's predominantly focused on
I think we should iterate. This is not stock advice, by the way. That's up to individual.
But we have to say that on this. But having said all of that, we're very rapidly approaching the end of our time. Have a great weekend. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Bye.